It's no secret that I love horror movies. Horror movies are some of the best movies out there today when done well. Some are good, some are bad, but one of the greatest ones in my opinion would happen to be Nightmare on Elm Street 4: A Dream Masters. In this video essay, I will show to you how Freddy Krueger, the main antagonist of this movie, or protagonist on how you look at it, used this movie as a platform to spring into the mainstream media.
Welcome to a brand new nightmare. He is the first in fear.
Will you help me? I'm sorry, someone help me, please!
But first, a brief history on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
In the early 1980s, Wes Craven, best known for such brutal films as Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, would find the inspiration for his most innovative project in the pages of real life.
The beginning of Nightmare on Elm Street really came to me with a series of articles in the LA Times about young men who were dying in the middle of nightmares. They were specifically from the Asian Rim. In this particular case, a young man had a severe nightmare and told his parents, "I can't go back to sleep, I'm going to die, I just know it." And the father was a physician and said, "Let me give you some sleepy pills." The kid didn't sleep the first night, and then in the second night, he didn't sleep again, and then it became clear that he was trying to stay awake despite everything. And finally, the kid fell asleep, and they took him upstairs and put him to bed, thinking, thank God, that little crisis is over. And in the middle of the night, they heard screams and ran into the room, and he was thrashing on the bed horribly. Literally before they got to him, he fell still, and he was dead. In the aftermath, the parents found all the sleeping pills. He had not taken them, he had hidden them in the bed. And they also found a Mr. Coffee machine in his closet with a hidden extension cord that went to the nearest plug, which was, to me, it was just so out of a movie. What if there was somebody in his dream that was, who killed him, what killed him? I said, okay, so what if it's a guy? My old Bible training of the sins of the parents being visited on the children. I said, perfect, it's something the parents did to him, and just kind of pieced it together from there.
One of the things that made Freddy Krueger very different from his counterparts in the late 80s, early 90s of horror movies from Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers was that Freddy Krueger was the first horror villain to actually talk. Sure, Leatherface grunted and Michael and Jason just walked very, very slow and yet still somehow caught their victims, but Freddy was the first one to talk back to his victims, making him, in a sense, a murderous Spider-Man. Sure, he would not only kill you, but send you off with a nice joke as well. One of the best examples of that would be A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: Dream Masters, as this was the first movie where Freddy actually bursted into the mainstream. How so, you would ask? Well, this was where Freddy Krueger, the horror movie villain, became Freddy Krueger, the megastar. A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Masters was released in 1988 with a $13 million budget and made $49 million back at the box office, making it the third highest rated movie in the franchise. This movie follows your basic Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street tropes. Freddy comes back to life, comes back to kill kids in their dream. The kids come back together, find a way to beat him. But this one was very different because, as I said before, this was the one where Freddy actually became funny.
I said, I feel that Freddy has sort of become like James Bond of horror films, and we sort of make him, in a way, the hero of the movie.
And we saw a movie before the movie was made, which is called Chinese Ghost Story. We were inspired by the feel of it. And this movie was really meant to be done in that Hong Kong action style, which is a lot of quick cuts, a lot of different shots.
Rennie was like ahead of everybody on that film.
He totally understood the youth culture. He was young himself. He completely understood how to make the script work.
With the success of Nightmare on Elm Street: Dream Master, Freddy hacked his way into the mainstream culture, not only becoming part of its lexicon, but becoming part of it itself.
By now, there's Johnny Carson jokes. There's political cartoons of Freddy. Freddy's in the funny papers. Tom Hanks is making Freddy jokes in movies.
It's Nightmare on Elm Street, and that would make him Freddy Krueger.
Anything that's bad is a nightmare in the National League, a nightmare in the NFL, a nightmare in the NBA, it's a nightmare in Iraq.
When you take a walk down our opposition's memory lane, it starts to look like Nightmare on Elm Street.
We were so part of the vernacular.
Everything from the beginning of the fact that it could be made into a sequel to the merchandising were things that never, ever occurred to me.
It was interesting to see all the Freddy stuff, all the merchandise, you know, because there was a million toys. The Freddy gloves, the hat.
The early merchandising, they just thought toys. They just went for kids.
A misconceived idea, incidentally, a Freddy doll.
He became kind of the ultimate cuddly toy to have next to you. He became cool.
I'm like, okay, I've made it. I'm an action figure.
Nobody ever takes them out of their packages anyway, so they're all hanging up on people's walls.
We've got 12 of these wall effect Freddy faces, 12 deluxe Freddy masks, and 12 screaming Freddy chests of souls.
Yes, Freddy became a mainstay in pop culture, and the man Robert Englund, who had played Freddy for all 9 movies, became arguably one of the biggest stars, not only in the horror movie world, but in Hollywood itself. The movie itself was split down the middle between critics and audience. The audience loved it, and the critics didn't think it was that great. But it did make over $49 million in its time in theaters. Now, I had mentioned this before, but I like to mention it again, focusing on it mainly. Arguably, Nightmare on Elm Street as a franchise had some of the most advanced thinking for horror movies. At the time, there were not many female heroes in horror movies. The Nightmare on Elm Street was the first franchise to have a hero as a woman.
Alice did take on the qualities of her friends as they were killed.
You could really see that arc in the character in the course of the movie. Somebody that I could make seem timid and vulnerable in the beginning, and who can then, in a believable way, become kind of like Sigourney Weaver in Aliens or something like that.
Poor Lisa. I just remember her being so shiny, and they were always powdering her because she was exerting so much energy because she was so physical in that one.
They did send me off to a day of karate school, but I was terrified I was going to hit myself in the head with nunchucks. And I've heard this comment so many, it's like, the wig was so bad, it doesn't even look like Alice from the back.
That's all acting, you know, because she's really kind of like a femme fatale in real life.
Your villain, to put a flip on a famous adage, is only good as...
Yes, it was never really the man coming to save the helpless woman. It was always the opposite way around. The woman coming to save the man, especially in this one here. Yes, this one used a lot of tropes from a lot of action movies. Mainly the fact that this one was probably one of the lowest budgets, so they had to work with what they had. This one was only made for $13 million. It did make its money back, but at the time, it was the lowest costing Freddy movie to date. Here's an example on how cheaply it was made, but also made very, very well, as you see in this clip right here.
Because we've already set that up.
We had no money to build any kind of a set, so all we could do is like hang these fabrics and make it look like it's like Japanese or something.
One of the epic fails, I think, of the sequences in Nightmare 4 when Rick fights Invisible Freddy.
The only death scene probably in any Nightmare on Elm Street where Freddy is not actually there. And I worked really hard for about 2.5, 3 weeks just to get some basic skills down.
This movie also wasn't a success purely for the movie itself, but also for everyone around it. The director, Renly Harley, got to go on to direct Die Hard 2 and a lot of other movies, including Legend of Hercules. Yes, while this movie was a commercial success, it also hurt the franchise a little bit as well. See, when this movie came out, it was such a big hit, people couldn't get enough of Freddy, so everything had Freddy on it. Yes, 'twas the media that killed the monster.
As time went on,
I would say by the 10th one, they were pretty miserable, and I stopped paying attention.
They really didn't care about the show. It was just a cash cow, and so we just ran amok. I mean, we do whatever it was that we wanted to do.
Action! While eventually Freddy did cool down, he never really left the pop culture scene. Not only being the king of horror, but one of the top pop icons today, most recognizable around the world. Yes, Freddy Krueger is the perfect example on how to take something from a small niche group and turn it into something bigger than life. So tonight, when you dream a little dream, make sure you dream a little dream for Freddy Krueger.